across, we poured through thousands and thousands of pieces of source art to kind of lock in. Plus there was the artistic vision, and so we were able to essentially combine those two into what you guys saw as Tally's face. We've done it throughout, you know?
If I could jump in for a second. Sure. I don't know if she's still here, could all the Samara cosplayers stand up? Mm-hmm. One, I don't know if the other one is actually staying here. There she is.
There she is.
And if I remember correctly, you are the face model for Samara. Woo!
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Rana McNear. She's the face model for Samara, and is a great example of how a real face can make it into Mass Effect.
Yeah. So Liara, her face is based on a real face model. Same goes for Commander Shepard, same goes for Miranda, obviously, Yvonne Strahovski. And we really felt that Tally deserved that same treatment. We wanted her to be based on a real person because there are people for whom that relationship is as important as the relationship with Liara or Miranda or any of the other love interests.
Yeah!
Patrick wrote Tally, and he's very passionate.
I have a vested interest.
Okay, and kind of one final question. This one keeps popping up. Do we have any comments about the indoctrination theory?
Okay, so first of all, the indoctrination theory kind of illustrates, again, how committed the fan base is. The thing is, we don't want to comment either way on it, and here's why. We don't want to be prescriptive for how people interpret the ending, especially with the extended cut DLC coming out. We don't want to, again, be prescriptive with how people should think things ended. We want the content to speak for itself, and we'll let it do so. So that's all I'll say.
Cool. Well, I want to get some of the rest of the team here involved in the panel as well. Alex. Alex is, as I mentioned, a level designer. He's also kind of a fact checker and information buff. And I know you've got some stats and that sort of thing you wanted to pass out.
Absolutely. So as we were preparing for this panel, I poured over the content from ME1 to ME3, trying to get a feel for how our content has evolved over time. And I hadn't realized how crazy we are. Let me give you a couple of numbers. So let's start with something really concrete. You all know the Normandy, right?
Yeah.
I contend that the Normandy is probably the most complicated piece of content ever created. We've had the same designer on it for 3 games, and thank God, because I don't think anybody else could stomach that. Just to give you a couple of numbers to keep things in perspective. So in ME1, there were 136 conversations on the Normandy. Yeah, a substantial amount of content. That bumped up to 172 on ME2. In ME3, there are 300 conversations that occur on the Normandy. And that's 150 of them are ambient conversations that go on, whether you interact with them or not, but 150 of them are full conversations. And some of these are multi-part. So that turns out to hours and hours and hours. I mean, across the entire game, I talked to our localization people, I've got some crazy numbers. I mean, we've got literally 300,000 VO words that were recorded. And that's in 7 languages. So we've got a team of 21 translators who in total translate about 4 million words. I mean, if you just look at a single language, we've got the equivalent of about 7.5 novels worth of text in this game. It just dwarfs when you start thinking about these numbers. I mean, as a designer, I get to play with a lot of different assets created by artists, created by animators, and created by writers, obviously. Just in the Normandy, there are about 15,000 nuts and bolts. Like 15,000 pieces that were put together lovingly by hand.
That also need to be tested. So, again, just to try to see the evolution of Mass 1 to Mass 3, I got a
few other interesting numbers. So the design team, for example, you could expect that, well, if we've been doubling almost every single time, the design team must have, tripled or something. Well, actually not quite. We started out in Mass 2, we were about 23. I can't actually take credit for that, I wasn't actually there at the time. In ME2, we were 55. ME3, 57. So we basically almost did the double amount of work in a relative amount of time. But there's good reasons for that. Obviously, the difference between Mass 1 and Mass 2 were probably a little more obvious from the user perspective. And the difference between Mass 2 and Mass 3 may be a little more subtle. But from our end, we see it as a lot more content, which is actually great to work with. Again, a couple of extra numbers. Number of plot values, the number of variables that designers play around with has increased insanely. Started off with about 3,500 different plot values in ME1, and some of these are really, really minor. Have you completed this combat, for example? In ME2, we bumped that up to about 6,400. ME3's got 15,000 plot states. Thank you for being such good quality assurance, is all I should say. Obviously, one of the things that we've voluntarily tried to push from ME1 to ME3 is digital acting. I mean, we like to breathe life in our characters. And one of the ways we do that is by creating a set of rules that help us determine how a digital actor transforms from one emotional state to the other to give, performance. In ME1, the system we had about 3,000 rules to determine what should be playing at any one time. In ME2, 5 times as much, 15,000 rules. ME3, 64,000 rules to just to handle animation in a digital acting environment.
And I might want to add that we kind of created this problem for ourselves. This is what happens when you leave an open-ended game with variable plot states. Each progressive game, you make things infinitely more complicated. And so that behind all of these things, Mass Effect 3 was the culmination of all of those plot states, all of those variables, all of those things. And that's partially why we got screwed in the end, really. It was difficult to do, and because of that, we had to work double as hard. So when we had the designers basically, double the team, it's because they were not making it double the levels, but because they were making it double the content. If you play Mass Effect 3 a number of times, you'll see a number of different things, just like Mass Effect 2.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'd like to insist on is that ME3 has probably 3 or 4 times the amount of conditional content that ME2 had. Because we were building on all the choices of ME1 and ME2, we had to painstakingly choose from an immense list of choices. And obviously, we couldn't address every single one. I mean, it's just not feasible. It's not feasible. But I think that with the design team and with the writing team, I think we came up with a set of important decisions, and sometimes not the decisions that you expected, which is quite voluntary, to try to make Mass 3 as much your story as it is ours. And I think we were fairly successful in that.
Speaking about the story, I'm going to get our writers here involved a little bit. There were themes and story elements that carried over from 1 into 2 and 2 into 3 across the whole arc. Yeah, 1 or 2. As was mentioned, and there are going to be spoilers. Some of the things that were commentaries or themes that were discussed, one of them was the challenge of the genophage. The genophage, for those that don't remember, was the disease that essentially rendered Krogans unable to reproduce. It was a massive...
If you don't know what the genophage is, you're sitting in the wrong room.
Maybe if you guys wanted to talk a little bit about, the challenges of the genophage, the characters.
2007, I was a lot like you, I suppose, out there. I was just a big fan of Bioware. When I bought Mass Effect 1, day it came out, loved it, had a great time with it. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, this genophage issue is pretty complicated. I wonder how Bioware's going to write that one. 2010, I'm working for Bioware, and they're like, Don Brown, you're wrapping up the Genophage issue. But I realized, well, that means I get to write Rex, and that means I get to write all these cool characters. And all right, how am I going to do this? Because it's a complicated idea that's full of a lot of politics, science, morality. And I realized in a lot of these cases, the best thing you can do is focus on the characters, which is what Bioware does well. And I felt it was just really a stroke of luck that up to that point we had never revealed what female Krogan looked like. It was something of a mystery in the IP. And it just struck me one day, which, well, here's the perfect way for the female Krogan to make her entrance, with Eve, as she's known in the game. And we focus it all on her. We make it about the cure to the Genophage will all be about her character, her hopes and dreams for the Krogan. I wanted to bring that in. So I wrote the mission, and actually Alex helped on the mission you've all played, I'm sure, where you rescue her on Sirkesh. Then we get back to the Normandy, we find out that there's this other side to Krogan. I wanted her to represent, where the males are always about war, violence, war, more violence. I wanted to show that there is another side to the Krogan. Because the trick is, face value, the Krogan, I don't know if they really deserve a cure, given that it's always war, violence, war, violence. And and in the character of Eve, I saw an opportunity to present, nope, there is another side to the Krogan. They are worth saving. And that's an idea that I wanted to weave in throughout the whole Genophage arc. So when I started writing the Tuchanka mission, where you actually go to cure the Genophage, or not, it was a terrific collaborative effort, I think, with myself, cinematics, design, art. I wanted the city that you saw in Tuchanka to reflect the fact that the Krogan weren't always, this violent warmongering species. Once upon a time, they actually had culture. I wanted to present the choice up front, which isn't something we always do, but going into that mission, you're going to have to decide, am I going to cure the Genophage or not? And I wanted to then weave that choice throughout the mission, so it's always on your mind. It's this thing weighing on your conscience. So when you get to the end, you've seen what the city looked like. You've heard Eve talk about her hopes for the Krogan. You've heard Rex or Reeve talk about their ambitions. Which in fact was the next challenge of it, was all the choices and plot states they talked about. So you could go into this with, how many people played it with Rex? How many people played it with Reeve? All right.
How many people played it with both?
So not as many played with Reeve, but he's out there, so that's a situation you have to address. But it was an opportunity to show with Rex as the leader, maybe there's more hope for the Krogan. With Reeve as the leader, it is a little iffy on how the Krogan are going to turn out. So of course, I'm developing this mission. As I started writing it, I'm realizing the spaghetti I'm tying myself up in, which is I've got Reeve talking to Morden, but Morden could be dead, who's talking to Paddock Wicks, who's the alternate for Morden.
His name.
Patrick Wicks. Anyway. So that became just a logistical and technical challenge, is having all these potentially dead characters talking to potentially other dead characters.
It's a seance!
To Bioware.
Getting into that notion of fan feedback driving our process, I know a lot of people felt Rex, they wanted more of him in Mass Effect 2, and we're hoping for more of him in 3. So I felt, all right, let's try and make that happen, despite, the complications. Just, believe me, loading these characters in memory, getting all these guys in the same scene is quite the feat. And my hat's off to our designers for making that all happen, so we can have all that great character interaction. Then the ultimate challenge, of course, is how are we going to pay this off? How's this final moment going to happen? And I've been imagining for well over a year and a half this sequence of events where someone's going up a tower, someone's going to release this cure, it's going to be this magical, awesome moment, the music will be there, and just kept envisioning it every day I came to work trying to bring this to life. And I knew it was going to work because early on I'd been going through some story concepts we'd all jotted down. And Patrick, who wrote Morden in Mass Effect 2, had written down, Morden should come to some sort of noble end. It was just an idea out there. And I saw that, we got together, and we suddenly realized what we could have there at the end. Which for Patrick was I think, quite the opportunity to pay your character off.
Yeah, I was really excited about Morden.